I woke up that morning to sunlight spilling across silk curtains and the faint hum of laughter downstairs. My 50th birthday, half a century of living, loving, and building a life I thought was solid. The scent of roses filled the room, hundreds of them, in glass vases arranged perfectly by the staff. For a moment I felt grateful. We'd come so far, my husband and I. I remembered the tiny apartment where we started, sharing instant noodles and promises of a better life. When I came down the grand staircase, my daughter shouted, "Mom, you look beautiful," and hugged me quickly before turning back to her phone. My son barely looked up from his tablet. My husband, Mark, stood by the marble counter, talking quietly into his phone, his voice low and impatient. Still, I smiled. "You're all here. That's what matters." The living room glittered with expensive decorations, a shimmering gold banner reading, "Happy Birthday, Mom." Even the champagne tower sparkled, but the warmth felt rehearsed. The staff moved too carefully, glancing at me as if they knew something I didn't. Mark finally hung up and walked toward me, holding a small velvet box. "For the woman who made it all possible," he said, kissing my cheek. Inside was a diamond bracelet, perfectly cold and flawless. I thanked him, but his eyes were already somewhere else, on his reflection in the glass, not on me. Guests began to arrive, board members, family friends, people I barely knew anymore. Everyone toasted to success, growth, and family. I smiled through it all, remembering when love, not status, was the measure of success. My laughter echoed in the air, hollow against the clinking of glasses. After the cake was cut, Mark cleared his throat. The room quieted instantly. He looked at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have a surprise for you," he said, motioning for our kids to stand beside him. Something life-changing. Everyone clapped as he handed me a thick envelope tied with a ribbon. I remember thinking it must be something wonderful, a vacation, maybe a trust fund for retirement. But when I saw that smirk curve at the corner of his mouth, something inside me froze. I never imagined the gift they were about to hand me would destroy everything I knew. Section 2, the birthday gift, 450 words. I untied the ribbon on the envelope, expecting another trinket, maybe a note of affection hidden beneath layers of paper. Instead, I found a thick stack of documents, neatly folded, stamped and formal. My heart skipped. I opened the top sheet and froze. Divorce papers. My eyes darted to Mark, who stood with his hands casually in his pockets, exuding a calmness I would never forget. "I'm leaving you," he said, his voice almost conversational. "I've been seeing someone else for months. My assistant." The room went silent. Laughter froze midair. Guests stared at me like I'd become a stranger in my own home. My daughter's face twisted, not in shock, but in what looked like quiet agreement. My son didn't even look up from the papers. "You've always been too emotional," my daughter said bluntly. "Too fragile to manage the company now. You're outdated, Mom. The world has moved on, and so have we." I blinked, trying to process her words, the betrayal slicing sharper than any cold steel. My son added, "Dad's right. We need someone who can make tough calls, not someone who cries over spreadsheets or staff disagreements." I stumbled back a step, clutching the papers. My hands shook, spilling champagne on the marble floor. The documents weren't just divorce papers. They included legal filings showing I had been removed from the company, the mansion, and all family assets. Every achievement I had poured myself into, every sacrifice I had made, erased with a few signatures and the cold consent of my own children. Guests murmured politely, glancing at me with that uncomfortable mix of sympathy and embarrassment. No one moved to comfort me. I could feel the weight of every eye, every judgment, every silent thought in the room press against my chest. My birthday, once a celebration of life and love, had become a public spectacle of betrayal. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers across the room, to make someone, anyone, acknowledge the injustice. But my voice wouldn't come. My throat tightened, and a hollow numbness spread through me, like I was watching my life being dismantled from the inside out. And then my son, my own flesh and blood, leaned closer, his tone patronizing and cold. "You should be grateful we're letting you stay the night. Everything I thought I knew, everyone I loved, had turned against me. And in that moment, I realized the real battle was only beginning. Section 3, The Aftermath. 400 words. Morning came, but it brought no comfort. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and indifferent, as if the world outside had no idea of the ruin inside these walls. I sat up in my bedroom, the divorce papers still clutched in my hand, and realized Mark was gone. No note, no explanation, just the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air like a bitter reminder. I reached for my wallet, intending to grab cash for breakfast, only to find the bank cards frozen. Every account emptied, every access revoked. I was trapped in the house that once symbolized our dreams, but now it felt like a museum of memories that no longer belonged to me. Downstairs, I could hear them, the children laughing together, their voices light and carefree, the same laughter I once would have cherished. Now it sounded like a mocking echo. Finally, we can move on, I heard my daughter say, her words cutting deeper than any blade. And my son, echoing the same sentiment. It's about time things changed. I sank to the edge of the bed, staring at the walls adorned with photographs of family milestones I had helped orchestrate. Birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, all captured moments I had lived for, now tainted by betrayal. Every smile in those pictures felt hollow, every memory rewritten by their disregard. The enormity of it hit me. This had been planned for months, a calculated coup, and I had been blissfully unaware. I packed a single suitcase, clothes, a few personal items, nothing else. Every step toward the front door felt like carrying the weight of a lifetime's work crumbling into dust. The staff avoided my gaze, their silence confirming the shift of power I could no longer ignore. I paused at the threshold, the mansion looming behind me like a castle that had betrayed its queen. My heart ached, a deep, hollow pain that settled into my chest. I walked slowly down the long driveway, suitcase in hand, feeling the cool morning air against my skin. It was a freedom laced with grief, a departure from everything I had built and loved. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. Section 4. Flashback. Building the empire, 400 words. I remember the early days vividly. Long before the mansion, the cars, or the public accolades, Mark and I started with nothing but a tiny apartment, a shared dream, and a stubborn determination to make something of ourselves. I handled the finances, crunched numbers late into the night, and negotiated contracts over phone calls that left my fingers raw from scribbling notes. While he schmoozed with clients, I made sure every deal was profitable, every partnership solid. My own dreams, travel, art, even simple weekends off were shelved, sacrificed in service of our shared vision. I still remember the thrill when our first property sold, the exhilaration of seeing our efforts bloom into something tangible. Mark hugged me tightly that night, whispering, "We did this together." And in that moment, I believed him. I believed in us, in our partnership, in the love that had carried us through lean apartments, late nights, and relentless work. But as the years passed, cracks began to appear. At first it was subtle. He would mention ideas in meetings without crediting me, take minor victories as personal triumphs. Then the erasure grew bolder. Press releases featured him alone. Photographs framed him beside our properties without so much as a mention of my role. I spoke up once, quietly, and was told, "Don't worry about it. People know who's really running things." But the recognition never came. My presence faded from the narrative while he basked in the spotlight. Even friends began to repeat the version he crafted. Mark, the visionary entrepreneur. Me, the supportive wife. I felt invisible, a ghost behind the empire I had meticulously constructed. Nights spent reviewing spreadsheets, weekends lost to meetings, years of strategic thinking, all gone in the eyes of the world. I never resented him openly. I loved the life we had built. But inside, a bitter truth grew. The man I had trusted with my heart had slowly started rewriting history, erasing me from the story we had written together. I closed my eyes and traced the memories. Each deal, each property, each long night of planning. The nostalgia was sharp, tinged with betrayal. I had built his empire, but I also knew every brick it stood on. The apartment was tiny, almost laughably so after the sprawling mansion I had called home for decades. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, and the silence crushing. I sat at a small table, eating a cold meal alone, my fork hesitating midair as the laughter and clinking glasses from my family's celebration floated faintly through the air. Their new beginning was happening just a few miles away, and I was invisible, reduced to nothing more than a shadow of the person who had built everything they now claimed. I stared at the divorce papers again, letting the edges press into my palms, imagining the life I had lost. Humiliation, despair, and grief tangled inside me, each emotion heavier than the last. I almost gave in to the dark thoughts creeping along the edges of my mind, thinking perhaps it was easier to disappear entirely, to erase myself, and let them win completely. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an old business associate appeared, a name I hadn't seen in years. Hesitant, I opened it. "You need to know," the message began. "Mark has been transferring company assets into accounts under your signature, without your consent. It's illegal. I have proof. You can stop him, but you have to act fast." My hands shook as I scrolled through the attachments. Contracts, bank transfers, signatures that were mine. Or what they claimed to be mine. Every document screamed deceit. Every number, every transaction, every forged signature was a testament to his greed and arrogance. A chill ran through me, sharper than any grief I had felt. The despair that had held me captive just moments ago began to shift. Anger sparked in its place, cold and precise. My mind started ticking, cataloging options, strategies, ways to reclaim what was mine, not through shouting, not through begging, but with calculated, undeniable power. For the first time since that devastating birthday, I felt a flicker of control. The fear, the humiliation, the hopelessness. They were still there, but they were fuel now, not chains. And that's when I realized he'd made his first mistake. I didn't rush to confront them. I knew anger would make me visible before I was ready, and visibility meant vulnerability. So I stayed quiet, letting the world believe I was defeated, while I quietly began plotting my return. The first step was reclaiming what was mine by right, an old, dormant company I had registered years ago, but never fully developed. Dusting off the paperwork, I reactivated it under my name alone, making sure every legal detail was airtight. Next, I reached out to 2 trusted investors, people who had always respected my work and integrity. I explained my vision in careful, measured terms, withholding the betrayal story for now, focusing instead on strategy and potential. Their support came quickly. They believed in me, in my competence, in my ability to turn even a small firm into a force to be reckoned with. I began building a new real estate firm, quietly acquiring small properties, renovating them, and reinvesting the profits. Every decision was deliberate, every move designed to strengthen my position without alerting Mark or the children. I kept a low profile, attending meetings only when necessary, and always ensuring that my reputation for integrity and skill grew faster than any gossip about my personal life. Simultaneously, I started gathering evidence. Emails, contracts, transaction records, everything that proved Mark's fraudulent transfers, forged signatures, and manipulations. Each piece added weight to the inevitable reckoning I was quietly preparing. I learned to see his empire not as an untouchable fortress, but as a network of vulnerabilities, weaknesses waiting to be exposed at the right moment. At night, when the apartment was silent and the city lights flickered against the windows, I allowed myself brief moments of reflection. I remembered the birthday papers, the laughter, the cold faces of the children. The sting of betrayal still burned, but now it fueled me rather than consumed me. I didn't need to fight them in their mansion. I'd build my own. And when the time came, everything they thought they had stolen from me would return tenfold, in a form they would never see coming. The first whispers reached me almost by accident. A broker mentioned a mysterious investor, snapping up properties at incredible prices, someone with deep pockets and flawless timing. I smiled quietly to myself, knowing exactly who they thought I was, but no one suspected it was me. I let the rumors spread slowly, strategically, until they reached Mark and the children. Within weeks, the effects were visible. Deals my husband had been counting on started falling through. Investors grew hesitant, double-checking contracts and questioning his management. Properties that had seemed untouchable suddenly stalled in escrow. Phone calls that once buzzed with confidence were now filled with tension, clipped words, and defensive laughter. I watched from the sidelines, reviewing every step, every panic-induced mistake. I had spent years understanding Mark's empire, the weak points in his holdings, the people who could be influenced, the timing of his acquisitions. Each vulnerability became a tool, each misstep a domino I could gently tip over without ever revealing myself. Even the children began to notice the shifts. My daughter called her brother, voice tight with worry. "Dad, something's happening with the downtown deal. Investors are pulling out." Their son tried to mask his panic, but it seeped through every word, every glance at a phone screen, every late-night conference call that ended abruptly. Behind the scenes, I coordinated quietly, using my network to strengthen my own firm, while subtly undermining theirs. I never called them, never sent emails that could be traced back to me. Every move was indirect, a masterclass in subtlety and patience. Watching them scramble, trying to stabilize a crumbling empire they thought was untouchable, gave me a cold, calculating satisfaction I had never felt before. The irony was exquisite. The people who had taken everything from me were now powerless to stop what they couldn't see coming. Their arrogance had blinded them to the quiet force I had become. The patient strategist they had never considered. Section 8. The Invitation. 350 words. I sent out the invitations weeks in advance, carefully worded to suggest grace and closure. "Join me for a charity gala," I wrote, "as I celebrate new beginnings." I made sure it sounded warm, cordial, and above all, unassuming. Mark and the children received theirs with barely concealed smugness, certain they would arrive to witness my failure and continue flaunting their ill-gotten wealth. The night of the gala, I arrived in understated elegance. A simple black gown, pearls that caught the light just so, and a calm confidence that belied the storm brewing beneath the surface. The guests were a mix of philanthropists, business leaders, and longtime friends, all gathered under glittering chandeliers and soft music. Cameras clicked as I entered, but no one yet realized the full story. Mark and the children arrived later, exchanging self-satisfied glances. They believed this would be a night to show off their successes, their wealth, their social dominance. They didn't notice the subtle whispers, the sideways glances from investors, the quick flashes of recognition from people who had quietly begun to notice my resurgence in the market. When it came time for the awards, I maintained my calm, listening to the speeches about ethical leadership, innovation, and vision. The host called the honoree's name and I stepped forward. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and suddenly every eye in the room turned toward me. I was the one being celebrated, the one credited with transforming an industry quietly, ethically, and successfully. Mark's smug smile faltered. His children's confident posture wavered. They scanned the room, hoping for some trick, some flaw, only to realize the truth. I was the tycoon, the innovator, the unstoppable force they had underestimated. Every investment, every acquisition, every quiet deal I had orchestrated had led to this moment. The applause echoed around me, but I barely heard it. My eyes found Mark's across the room, and the satisfaction settled deep in my chest. The look on his face when he realized I now owned everything he lost. Priceless. Section 9. The Confrontation. 400 words. After the gala, the crowd had thinned, leaving the soft hum of conversation and the fading glow of chandeliers. I was alone near the balcony when I felt him approach. Mark's steps were hesitant this time, the arrogance I had known for decades replaced with an unsteady urgency. Behind him, our children lingered, their expressions awkward and shameful, unsure where to place themselves in this reversal of fortune. "Please," he began, voice tight with desperation. "We can fix this. I can make it right. Let's talk." He searched my eyes for some trace of the woman who had once unquestioningly loved him, But I wasn't that person anymore. I listened quietly, letting him spill excuses and blame, detailing how he had been pressured by investors, by business partners, by circumstance. Every word revealed more of his arrogance and short-sightedness. I stayed calm, the years of betrayal, humiliation, and plotting distilled into a steady control I had never felt before. When he finally paused, panting, searching for forgiveness he thought I would grant, I handed him a thick folder. Inside were documents, contracts, bank transfers, signatures, all proof of his illegal maneuvers, all undeniable evidence of the empire he had tried to manipulate in his favor. "I'm offering you a choice," I said softly, deliberately measured. "You can keep this one small property if you sign over the rest to me. No court battle, no public scandal, just acknowledgement of the truth." His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages, realizing the meticulous detail, the undeniable proof, the trap he had walked right into. He swallowed hard, glancing at our children who avoided his gaze. No one spoke. The air was heavy with realization. The family he had built on manipulation and entitlement was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Mark hesitated, fingers trembling, a man stripped of control, exposed to the full weight of his misdeeds. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Every second of silence carried the authority of someone who had endured, survived, and outmaneuvered. Finally, he signed. Hands shaking, eyes hollow, he handed the papers back. And for the first time, I didn't feel revenge. I felt peace weeks passed in quiet triumph. The empire I had rebuilt growing stronger, more secure, and entirely under my control. Then one evening, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed my daughter's name. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with curiosity. They had come to me after all. Their voices trembled on the line, hesitant and small. "Mom, Dad, he's left," my daughter admitted. "The assistant, she took everything that was left. We don't have the house, the cars, the lifestyle we thought was ours." My son chimed in, shame creeping into every word. "We messed up, Mom. We didn't see it. We didn't understand." I listened quietly, letting them spill their guilt, their panic, and their disillusionment. I could hear the cracks in their pride, the realization of how blind they had been, and the emptiness that replaced the comfort and wealth they had taken for granted. I didn't offer quick solutions or promises to restore what they had lost. That wasn't my role, not anymore. Instead, I let silence linger, giving them space to absorb the weight of their actions and the consequences of their choices. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "Now you'll learn the value of what love used to mean. The trust, the loyalty, the sacrifices you ignored, they can't be bought back with money or status. You have to understand that for yourselves." They were quiet for a moment, the gravity of my words settling in. I could almost hear them processing a lifetime of entitlement, a family dynamic twisted by arrogance and self-interest. Their guilt was palpable, and I allowed them to feel it fully, because this was the lesson they had refused to learn when it mattered most. And that's when my daughter whispered, almost too softly to believe, "Mom, we were wrong." I didn't rush to forgive, and I didn't need to. The acknowledgement itself was enough. For once, they understood the cost of betrayal, and for once, I felt that generations could begin to heal, even if the scars remained. Months passed, and with each one, the sharp edges of betrayal softened. The pain never fully disappeared, but it became a companion, a reminder of how far I had come, rather than a weight dragging me down. I began to rediscover the parts of myself I had abandoned. The quiet joys, the dreams shelved for decades, the creativity I had sacrificed while building an empire for someone else to claim. I found a small seaside home, perched on a cliff, where waves crashed against the rocks below. The salty air filled my lungs with freedom I hadn't known I needed. Mornings were my own again. I would sit with a cup of coffee, the horizon stretching endlessly before me, and feel the simplicity of life in its purest form. The house wasn't a mansion, and the furniture wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, every inch infused with my choices, my love, and my vision. One afternoon, I dusted off my old paints and brushes, items that had lain untouched for years, collecting the faint smell of dust and memory. I set up an easel in the sunlit corner of the living room and let my hand move freely across the canvas. Colors blended, swirled, and emerged in ways I had forgotten I could create. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul, a declaration that I still existed, still mattered, still had power over my own life. I realized then that peace was far more intoxicating than revenge. Revenge is loud, a spectacle meant to be witnessed. Peace is quiet, profound, and enduring. Peace means standing in your own worth, knowing that the world's perception, the betrayals, and the injustices cannot diminish who you are at your core. Every memory, every scar, every triumph contributed to a life that was fully, unapologetically mine. I smiled as I looked out at the ocean, the sunlight dancing on the waves, and thought about how far I had come. The mansion, the empire, the betrayal, they were chapters, not definitions. I had been erased once, but I had rewritten myself. My legacy wasn't in wealth or recognition. It was in resilience, in rediscovery, and in the quiet assertion of self-worth. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. Section 12. The Epilogue. My Real Birthday. 350 words. Exactly 1 year later, I hosted my birthday dinner, not in a mansion, not under chandeliers or golden banners, but in my seaside home, surrounded by real friends, the ones who had stayed when everyone else had turned their backs. The table was simple, adorned with fresh flowers from the garden, candles flickering softly. There was no pretense, no obligation, just laughter, warmth, and the kind of conversation that left your heart full instead of hollow. We toasted to life, to resilience, and to honesty. I watched my friends share stories, their eyes sparkling with joy, and felt a serenity I hadn't known in decades. The pain of the past year lingered like a shadow, but it no longer had power over me. I had rebuilt myself brick by brick, decision by decision, and now I could enjoy the simple triumph of being whole again. Through the window, I saw fireworks erupt over the horizon, their colors reflecting off the water, brilliant and fleeting. And there it was, my new business headquarters in the city, bold and undeniable, my name displayed proudly for all to see. Every investor, every deal, every late night of planning and quiet strategy had culminated in this. An empire I had built not for recognition, but for my own truth. I raised my glass and thought of the past, the divorce papers, the betrayal, the humiliation. They had given me a moment designed to break me, a gift disguised as devastation, but I had returned it tenfold, wrapped not in anger or spectacle but in silent, unassailable success. And as I sipped my wine, watching friends laugh around me, the fireworks painting the night sky, I realized that true victory was far quieter than any confrontation or spectacle. It was in peace, in strength, in living unapologetically, on my own terms. They gave me divorce papers as a gift. I returned them success wrapped in silence.